Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Sorry about rescheduling this call. It was supposed to happen yesterday evening, but we had a couple things come up. And again, today a few things came up, so we don't have Cindy with us today, but I'm Emma, and we are going to be talking about sanctions and the coronavirus and kind of the coronavirus in general, but how sanctions are going to be hindering the response of different countries to address this. And I've got a couple of people with me right now, and I will let them introduce themselves. I guess I've got Lisa right next to me. So, Lisa, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, I'm right next to you.
Yes,
Okay,
you're
great.
technically next to me.
Thank you. Hello, thank you so very much. My name is Lisa Davis, and I am with the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. I happen to be with its healthcare working group, and I am also a member of the People's Organization for Progress in New Jersey. And I'm just so very pleased to say that I know some of the wonderful women on who are participating, Madeline and Emma. I'm sorry, Diane. I'm sorry, but anyway, yeah. But I'm getting to everybody. But anyway, we have been organizing and doing all kinds of wonderful things in New Jersey in terms of being on the front line of these movements, and that's very important.
All right. How about Madeline? Why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. My name is Madeline Hoffman. I am the Green Party of New Jersey's candidate for U.S. Senate in 2020. And I'm also a longtime peace and justice activist, part of the Green Party of New Jersey and its Green Council, and have, in my former position as director of a nonprofit peace organization, opposed many of the wars that we're involved in now, and have also been involved in addressing other kinds of economic warfare, such as sanctions, not solely the military intervention. So I am very pleased to be a part of this call.
Thank you, Madeline. And Diane, how about you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Diane Moxley. I organize with the Green Party and the Socialist Party in New Jersey. I was a candidate for Congress in 2018 and organized with some other groups, as well as we are all on the board of the March on the Pentagon group. And excited to get some things.
Oh, looks like Diane froze on us. Give her a second and see if she comes back. Oh. Let me send her a message quick. All right. Well, maybe we can get Diane back. Her picture is frozen. But we can get chatting, and maybe Diane can
to see all of our networks connect. We know.
Oh.
All right, maybe she can call us back. Well.
Oh,
are you still there, Diane?
Is she back?
Just realizing.
Okay.
She left.
Now she's
okay.
gone.
Now she's back.
Yes. All right.
All right, anyhow.
I will call her back in a moment, but I'll just get us started by saying that, so there are obviously a few of us on the screen here, but this is supposed to be an interactive discussion. So we will talk amongst ourselves about what the current situation is right now and what's happening and the kind of things that we're hearing from places like Iran and what they're experiencing because of U.S. sanctions and how that might be different than what other countries are experiencing right now. But if you have something to contribute, if you're watching this, you have a link to share, information to say, or a question to ask, just put that in the comments and we will respond and read what you're saying. So this is a community discussion. So it's not just for us to tell you things. We want this to be everybody participating in this. So please don't hesitate to comment something.
And one of the things that if I could just add, because the way this is being handled, this is an unprecedented situation. And we're talking about a virus that is new, quote unquote. So we're learning things too. You know, we're getting this information and trying to figure out, you know, how best to respond as we hear things. So we need everybody's input and ideas and help and suggestions, everybody's.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Welcome back, Diane.
Hi, sorry about
That's
that.
okay.
I have a feeling we're probably all going to have internet. Well, I can only speak for myself, but perhaps we're even having internet problems because of people in what is it, social distancing and being at home, and we might have more people on our internets.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, and
Yeah.
Diane, it's funny, you should use those words, social distancing, because I mean, when I first heard those two words, it sent a chill up and down my spine, because we are already, before this happened, before the coronavirus, I believe we were also already kind of isolated and separated from one another. So I'm hopeful that instead of increasing the distance, even though the physical distance will definitely be a factor, that we can somehow find creative ways to join ourselves together and connect virtually, so that, and otherwise, but primarily virtually, so that we build a stronger community, not one that's, you know, more at where all of us are more distant from one another out of fear, because we know what fear can do in the
Exactly.
area of war and sanctions. We know what it's done. So we don't want the fear to break our society apart even further.
That's true. Looks like we lost Diane again.
Yeah, more.
Well, I'm going to put something up on the screen real quick that
Okay.
I'm sure most people have heard of at this point. It's a tweet that was obviously posted on Twitter back on March 12th, a list of all of the supplies that the Iran's Ministry of Health and Medical Education put out there, basically saying we don't have enough supplies. We don't have what we need to treat all of the people that are coming down with this, and it's a big list here, and a lot of people thankfully paid attention to this and wrote articles about it. But it's something so important to keep in mind right now, that this is a global thing that everybody's dealing with across the world, and within our own countries. Part of the reason we want everybody in their own country to do a good job responding to this is because it affects everybody. The whole entire world is in this together. And the fact that the United States is directly harming certain countries' ability to respond is bad for the whole world. It's, you know,
That's correct.
It's very scary, and there are calls now for the U.S. to relax on sanctions or to stop the sanctions in the midst of this. Obviously, we all here think that those should not exist ever, but the fact that people are actually paying attention to it right now and saying, at least right now, we need to stop, is really good. And it's a great time for people like us who are aware of the harm of sanctions to put it out there in front of people and say, this is why sanctions are so bad, that it's not just affecting the government of these countries. There's a medical emergency and they cannot help the people. That's horrible. But even in the midst of that, like, we've got the United States is still bombing people in the Middle East. Trump just authorized a new bombing campaign now. It's shocking.
And I hear no no criticism or no objections coming from anybody within the Congress or the Senate. That would be something so nice to go after Trump about, but they don't. They don't go after him or any government or any president for that matter or government when it comes to bombing and killing people. And I will say this much: the people of the United States have has we have got to really up our game because this is outrageous. For 20 years at least, overt war. I'm not even going to get into the covert wars and the or any of those other kind of wars and all the other kind of things that we do, but we have been overtly at war, invaded other countries who we know had nothing to do with what happened on 9/11. And most of the American people have just gone to sleep on it or turned their backs because they don't have to look at these bodies or anything like that. But now we are facing a situation over here where we can be impacted, and our sense of well-being or our sense of security and being able to get any of the things that we need are being impacted. And of course, it's a crisis level for us, but yet we are not talking about ending these wars and demanding that that happen, and also just dismantling imperialism. We don't have those conversations, and we need to, because this is outrageous. It is just outrageous.
Yeah, it's outrageous. It's despicable. It's inhumane. Yesterday or several days ago, the United States launched several airstrikes on Iraq because they claimed that they were targeting facilities that were backed by Iranians. There were exercises in South America between Colombia and the United States with an eye towards potentially invading Venezuela, another country that's been crippled under sanctions. Thousands have died so far under those sanctions. And then I heard a story from a friend in Yemen about the coronavirus reaching Yemen somehow. You know, the military could be a carrier too, U.S. military. And, you know, it's so the fact that while people are struggling simply to survive, the whole of Italy is on lockdown, Spain is on lockdown. What is the U.S. doing? Bombing the heck out of other countries or preparing, not those particular countries, but Middle East and Asia and South America. The United States should put a halt to all of it, temporarily at minimum and permanently if we're successful. But we have to find creative ways to protest, because we can't have 250 or more people in one spot in New Jersey right now. But yeah, and Lisa, I'm with you 3,000%. There should be none of this going on at this particular time. And then if we stop, we can completely reassess the policies and go forward in a different direction.
Exactly. We are the fabric of war and oppression is so embedded in every aspect of this society. It was founded upon it. It is like in the very wiring of people and how we think about things and how we approach things. It just is like how medicine, how healthcare is literally weaponized in this country. Weaponized. I'll just say real quickly, because I don't want to dominate this, as I know that I have the potential to do that. But just real quickly, we need to be aware of something called gain of function research, which sounds so innocuous. You were to say gain of function research to somebody, it doesn't sound threatening to you. But that is the research under which the United States engages in making viruses and diseases far more deadly than what they are. And in 2015, this was published in Nature magazine by a scientist named Ralph Barrick. He's with the University of Northern Carolina, I believe, and he published how he was able to create a bat coronavirus, and this was based on the horseshoe bats in China. And he also worked with someone, he worked with many different people, but one of the institutions that he worked with in the creation of this bat virus was somebody from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Those are just too many coincidences to ignore. And some of the scientists who were objecting to this kind of research were saying, well, why did you do that? Because all you have succeeded in doing is creating a virus that is now even more deadly, that's highly contagious, and that's easily transmittable to human beings. Why did you do that? And now, of course, they're trying to backtrack away from that. And I also saw that virus had some way that it was able to mimic certain components of HIV. Now, I'm not saying that it acts like that, but this is just stuff that I'm seeing. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not a medical doctor, so scientifically, I can't necessarily speak that language or break things down and explain them to people. But I certainly do know some things that I clearly understand with that. And we shouldn't even have that kind of research. And that's very important to understand, because there are people who are saying, and there's enough coincidences, if we want to use that word, to say, wait a minute, this has to be looked at, because Iran and China, they're saying that this virus was weaponized against them. And I know that some of the numbers say that Iran, there's at least, as of today, 10,700 cases of people who are infected with this virus. But if you look at the surrounding countries with Iran, they don't have that many. They might have maybe 80 or 10 or something like that. So Iran is surrounded by all these other countries in that area, and yet they have 10,700 cases of people who have been infected with this virus, not to mention China. And we all know that we can't underestimate the seriousness of this. We can't downplay it, because I certainly know I don't have enough information to do that or to say what's what. And I don't ever want to have to do that. But we always have to look at the geopolitical aspects of things. And health is very, very political. It's political in terms of how we are conditioned to examine things, how we are conditioned to believe that I don't like to use the word cure, but for lack of a better word, the cure can exist. It's very, very political. And we certainly cannot ignore the geopolitical aspects of this. And we know that China is present like a very, very strong counter to the US. They are very, very strong economically. They are becoming an increasingly very strong, politically powerful country. And I know that the United States is threatened by that. And we know they don't like that, because the United States wants to be the number one superpower, or the number one power. There's nothing super about anything that this country has done, but the number one power.
Yeah, and do I hear a voice in the back there? No.
No.
I thought I heard Diane's voice for a minute.
I was checking.
But the United States, this chemical warfare, Vietnam War, we used Agent Orange. In some of the other more recent wars, the United States used depleted uranium in Iraq and elsewhere, all over in some of our more recent wars. So it's not unheard of at all for the United States to use weapons of war that can destroy vegetation and can create really negative health effects for the people in these other countries where we believe we have a right to their resources. That's the imperialist way. And then we also don't seem to take care of whatever illnesses appear. The United States government and the corporations that made these weapons, these chemical weapons, never took full responsibility for them and never fully compensated our veterans for them. So, yeah, the whole idea of weaponizing illnesses too, I think it speaks even more urgently to the need to rethink this whole idea that if we have a problem with somebody or someplace, we'll just drop a bomb or send it in the tanks or handle it militarily. We have to find ways. That's why I think the social distancing term got to me so much, because the more you distance, the more you dehumanize, and the more you dehumanize, the more the U.S. government can get away with saying, well, we've just got to bomb them over there, or put these sanctions on and keep squeezing and squeezing. I mean, if somebody in your family or your neighbor or something said, please, I need more supplies, I need this in order, to get better, probably most of us would not turn away, but when it has to do with people on the other side of the world who don't look like us, or whom we think we can exploit for whatever reason, then we just do it. I think it's really a sign of how, I don't know, how cruel the United States government can be. It needs to change. It just needs to change.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, just my presence, and I always want my presence and my face and my color to be and a reminder of how vicious and cruel the United States can be.
Yes.
And they do use medical research to do the same thing. They really do. And I recognize and I know that a lot of people rely on, modern day medicine, which is, the Eurocentric version of modern day medicine. People have doctors and they go to the hospitals and stuff like that. And I know it's very important for people to be able to feel comfortable with their healthcare practitioner when they have them, because we know that a lot of people don't, because they can't afford this in the United States. But I don't want to make this like I'm speaking against them, or I don't even want to make this like, well, I happen to be into the natural ways, but I don't want to turn this into a naturopathic versus allopathic or anything like that. What we have to do is we have to be empowered to understand the dynamics of any system that we're dealing with, and also that there are other ways of handling things. But we have to understand the ruthlessness and the barbaric practices that much of what is considered medicine, what is considered traditional medicine in this country, was founded upon, and experimentation of people, experimentation on the African community. It did, and it continues to do that kind of thing. From what I understand, many of their restrictions are much more lax than they are over here in terms of experimentation with other countries, but they do it. They do it readily. They do it very easily. At least they used to be able to do it very easily, but with African countries and in India and things of those natures that they do this. And this whole system of imperialism just doesn't respect any form of life. So we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to understand that this is what modern day medicine, much of it was founded upon. And so we just have to proceed with our eyes open. And I'll just say, when we look at what the CDC and the World Health Organization are telling people, I really think that what they're saying is inept. It's really not helpful at some point. Only thing I'm seeing constantly, and I try to monitor and to follow these organizations about this situation, that I just want to know if things change, or there's a lot of information we all need to know. But all you ever hear about what you can do is you always hear there's no cure, and the only thing you can do is just avoid people, stay away from germs, avoid people and stay away from germs. Avoiding people and staying away from germs are like two of the most difficult, impossible things you can do. Not that we shouldn't, not that we should ignore that, but why aren't you talking about how to build up the immune system? You don't have to put that forward as a cure, but you can say, you got to build up the immune system. And we have a healthcare system and a World Health Organization and the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, that completely disassociates nutrition and building up your immune system from diseases and from anything, any kind of way of helping to prevent yourself from getting them, or if you do get them, helping to ensure that you're going to be able to survive, at little damage to your body. It completely disassociates the concept of nutrition and the immune system from health and from getting better, but it promotes the pharmaceutical industries, because that's what they're telling people. They're saying there's no cure. A vaccine has not been created, and the only thing you're doing is just creating far more panic. We need to be empowered, but we need to know that there are things we can do, and we must build up our immune systems.
Yes. not only in the health realm in this country, but in everything really, we are incredibly reactionary. We do not think about how to prevent things and how to better health or better society or better communities or better our interactions with other countries. We wait to react, and then in that
Yeah.
reaction they foster fear or whatever needs to happen to get people to sign on to it and to go along with it. And the medical aspect of what is happening right now, especially with states of emergency declared throughout our entire country and individually in different states and different localities, the ability of them to potentially make it mandatory for people to maybe take a medication or vaccinate, though that's been laid out, unfortunately, that pathway is being paved where it could become mandatory if they do happen to create a vaccine for this. And that what you were mentioning, Lisa, about experimentation, that is something that people really need to understand, that our government has experimented on our own people and people overseas for ever. And there's no
Yes.
reason to think that that's not still happening now. There's no reason to think that if something gets fast tracked now, that they might not try to experiment on a country where coronavirus is there's an outbreak right now, and medicating people there to see if it works there and they can bring it here, or doing it within certain communities here. It's just, there's so many things for us to pay attention to right now. It's very overwhelming, but something like a mandatory vaccination might pop up, so people need to be prepared to know how they're going to respond to that possibility. And when people are
Well,
afraid,
and
they might say okay a lot easier than they would
Exactly.
have if they weren't afraid.
and the more distance that there is put between us, more social distancing, I come back to those words again, the harder it's going to be to fight back. And I just yesterday, the day before, when I'm switching back to the actual military operations or exercises. How if the public has some ideas, how do we organize virtually? How do we organize to say, no, you should not continue to bomb. The United States should not continue to bomb other countries, should not, and the resolution just passed in the House the other day, with virtually no opposition, for regime change in Nicaragua. I mean, let's slow this down. But we need to figure out ways to create public squares or public days of action when we are being told to self-quarantine or we're under quarantine. How do we get around all of that in ways that we can still oppose this country's policies and the inhumane nature of bombing countries or planning to bomb countries during a time of worldwide health emergency? It makes no sense. It is not consistent with humane behavior. But I wonder how do we get around that and build the kind of opposition we need?
I think one benefit right now is that everybody is paying attention to this situation, because it's finally something that's reached the doorstep of Americans. It's so easy for people here to ignore what's going on overseas, even if they think they care. So many people don't have an awareness of what other people are dealing with because of us. And it's hard to reach those people because people are comfortable. And they've got us in a place in our country where people are comfortable, but they're teetering on the edge of not being stable. So they have no time to consider these other things. They can't work less and go to actions and to protest or whatever, because everybody's kind of held on by a thread right now. But so right now, while coronavirus has everybody's attention, showing the way that this is so much harder for other countries who are adversely affected by whatever it is that we're doing to them, is kind of a way to get in to maybe finally reach people. And there are people in the government, you know, whatever you can think that might be useful, you can think that it might not, but people like Ilhan Omar are calling for lifting the sanctions on Iran right now. So
That's yes.
and because that's happening, even if you don't like to get behind what elected officials are doing or not, this is a time that we can use that to as an in to put this in front of people. And even though they are, like we mentioned before, they're just talking about right now. They're not talking about doing this forever. But this is our opportunity to say why right now and why forever these things shouldn't exist. So you know, people like that are beginning to tweet about it. They're making statements. They're trying to bring this in front of the greater government to be addressed. And I think we have to kind of ride those coattails a little bit, and that's something to kind of organize behind. But of course, yeah, if we can't gather in groups outside, just because of the rules and for our own safety, it's a new frontier. Like none of us have ever experienced something like this before. So gathering online is really one of our only options right now. But you know, we know there are governments out there that control their citizens' access to the internet and information. We know that happens here. We know that Facebook, social media cuts off the flow of information. Facebook is already doing that about coronavirus.
Yes.
You know, it's scary. And you know, if we
yes.
What was that, Madeline?
No, well, how is Facebook doing that?
Well, Facebook is doing that all the time.
Yes.
So as someone who works in independent media, I see the background of what Facebook pages who are connected to outlets that are publishing things, what they have to deal with fact checkers. And Facebook, the fact checkers that they have hired and that they work with are just third-party groups that often have science community connections, that have weapons industry connections, things like that. They go through stuff that gets widely shared on Facebook and they'll fact check it, just kind of like the way that Snopes goes over things, kind of a setup like that. And they will flag your page if they don't agree with something that was shared. They won't tell you this happens, but as soon as your page gets flagged, the reach of your page goes down dramatically. So you start not showing up in people's news feeds, and people don't see your content as much. And once you realize something like that happens, it's your responsibility to reach out to the fact checker and to say, how can we fix this so that you take the strike away? Which is not a pleasant thing to do, because then you're bending to the narrative that they want to get out there. And this actually happened with one of the outlets that I worked with. I don't know if you all have heard of Event 201. It was
I heard about that. I don't know what it is though.
So Event 201 was a gigantic simulation of how the world can respond to a pandemic, which happened to actually be a coronavirus, ironically.
Oh, wow.
This happened in late 2019. And it was, you know, the WHO, Johns Hopkins, like this isn't a fake thing. This happened. And on YouTube, you can watch all of the videos of it. They did news simulations of like newscasters coming in and being like, the coronavirus has now spread to blah, 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 this many places. This many people are dead. We need to manage fake news. We need to quarantine people. And the reason they did this, you know, simulations are so that people can be prepared. And so that they can have an idea of what the economic impact might be, how many people might die because of something like this. So this was very much something that actually happened. You can watch the videos, it exists. But so some outlets reported on this. They didn't say, well, some people went so far as to say this, but the majority of people didn't go so far as to say this was predicting this specific strain of coronavirus. They knew it was happening, so they held this thing. We're just reporting on the fact that it exists. And we were fact checked and communicated with the fact checkers, who really sounded like they had no idea that it was actually a thing. They were just told, probably, to kind of scrub Facebook or scrub the internet of mentions or stories on this Event 201 thing. And so we had to go back and forth with emails, and we were like, look, Event 201 happened. We're not making it up. So that's a way that Facebook works through their fact checkers to attack probably some of the stories or the links that share the most, to attack these pages that are trying to get those things out there. And they can fact check you so many times that suddenly your page cannot show up in people's news feeds anymore. And that happens to independent outlets, and that happens to specific like pages that belong to journalists. And it happens every day. And it's probably going to ramp up in the midst of what we're going through right now, because there's a very specific narrative that they want to get across. They don't want us to know that there are Chinese officials and Iranian officials that are saying this might be a bioweapon. And that's a valid thing to consider. And right now, I don't know if it's that important for us to focus on that so much, because we need to focus on protecting ourselves and preparing ourselves for this. But that's not, those ideas are not something that should be scrubbed from the internet, because it's actual government officials from other countries are saying this. It's not made up information. So we have to be really careful about the spread of information.
And I know for a fact that they are definitely going after people who work in the naturopathic field, and people who talk about vitamins and various herbs. In fact, I think somebody sent me something one time, and it was just, this wasn't even during this pandemic. They were just saying that they used something, for the flu or whatever, and I think they said elderberry extract. And I saw a flag about, and it was so ridiculous. And another time, I think I maybe sent somebody something, and it got flagged. And I don't even see how you can challenge it. Normally, and I've been suspended by Facebook enough times, I'm expecting another one to come up really soon. But I don't see the way to challenge it. It's not like they tell you, if you disagree with this, they'll just say, if you disagree, you could just say whether you disagreed or you don't. But I don't see any place, any way for you to comment, any way for you to say, wait a minute, why are you doing this? And I want an answer. You said this and da 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 da. I don't see that at all. But they are, I've heard other people who've done a lot of work in the field of naturopathic research talking about how their sites are being stopped, they're being blocked, they're being limited. And a lot of people have been talking about how vitamin C therapy is excellent for dealing with flus and viruses. And I'm aware of just touching my nose, but I don't care. I'm going to touch my face, because it's everything that you do now. You have become so aware of it. But yeah, they're saying this. Like when I look at some of the things that I'm seeing coming from China, and which, by the way, from what I understand, China is starting to rebound from this somewhat. A lot of people have recovered. They seem like they're getting this situation somewhat under control. But I know that when I look at and I read some of the things that China is working with in terms of their medication and their protocols there, I see the words like traditional Chinese medicine, and I also see nutrition therapy, in addition to looking at the other kind of medicines that are like in the Western world and things of that nature. I see them doing this. I heard about a person 103 years old who had, advanced stage CODV, COVID-19. She was in the advanced stages of that, very severe, and she was able to come home to recover. And they said that she had no underlying issues. But I also saw that there was another case of somebody about 100 years old, and this person did have a lot of underlying issues. But again, they worked with nutritional therapy. I know that China is starting to use intravenous vitamin C. In fact, Shanghai hospital published that on their website. They published it in Chinese. I had to use Google Translation to get it translated, but it looked pretty good from what I could see. But they are using these kind of modalities. They are incorporating them in the treatment, and yet I don't hear anything. I don't even see, I don't hear anything about nutrition when I look at American mainstream
Yeah.
sources. I don't hear
Mm-hmm.
anything about that at all. I saw one thing about garlic one time on the World Health Organization website, and there was something listed way down at the bottom of the page, and they said it in the way they're like, some people are saying that garlic can help you. Is that true? Well, garlic might help, but there's no proof that garlic can do whatever. It's they offer it like that, and that was it. That was the only thing, only reference I've ever seen to anything pertaining to nutrition. And people, we've got to fight this with everything that we can. We eat every single day, so we should be intentional about what we put in our
Mm-hmm.
bodies. We have to build up our immune system. We lose nothing by doing that. We have everything to gain
That's
by doing
right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time you ever heard of anybody dying from an overdose of vitamin C or vitamin A? And not that I'm saying that people should not pay attention and be careful about even how they take those kinds of things, but they are important and they matter.
Yes, and actually, the vitamin C thing, there have been some people who have tried to draw attention to that because there are studies happening in China right now that you can
Yes.
look up the studies. They're checking to see what's the
Well,
outcome when people use this. Is it helping? And they're actual studies, and there are people in the United States who've tried to bring attention to that, and they've actually been labeled as conspiracy theorists already, and they've been
Yes.
blocked. Their stuff has been labeled as like fake news or whatever,
Mhm.
which is
well,
concerning. And there's other things that are being attacked rather than propping up health. There's a lot of articles out there that are trying to downplay the use of things like elderberry syrup and colloidal silver and all kinds of things. Like, yeah, we shouldn't be like throwing health recommendations out there from like a place where we don't have experience with those things, but the fact that these are in mainstream media and they're actually attacking these things that people have used for years
well,
is not
and
nice.
I'm and Lisa and Diana, when I happen to be home because schools have moved all their work on to online, so I was home and I happened to watch some of the press conference from the Rose Garden the other day, and people who were being paraded out there to speak to the American public were people from companies that stand to benefit from whatever medical hardware
Mm-hmm.
that will be used and developed. Can you get more of these? Can you get more of those? And they were all corporate officials.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the problem, the deeper problem of having a healthcare system that's basically privatized, or at least for many. We don't have health insurance for all. We don't have Medicare or a version of Medicare, expanded and improved Medicare for everyone. And so we can't get into cars and go to pick up something and drive through. I guess in New Rochelle you can, and maybe one other place, but we can't go for a test, and we can't, the what Emma and Lisa what you're talking about, that goes against the corporate profit. A lot of that can cut into corporate profits. So we really need to take a look at how we make healthcare and health insurance available to everyone. I've been reading more and more too about, well, what happens if the homeless population, if
Exactly.
coronavirus starts to get through the homeless population, nobody's safe. When none of us is safe, we need to have the most vulnerable people have the ability to get protection or to be protected, to know whether they have it. And so we live in I mean, it's not a cure-all to have that, obviously, because other places with universal health care or medicine for everybody, they're experiencing problems.
Mm-hmm.
But it would certainly help, I think, to get the profit out of this and start, having it work for everybody, especially the most vulnerable. And I don't know, all the schools moving online, I understand that. But in New Jersey, we have some 259,000 people, students who have no access to electronic devices,
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
which
wow.
means their parents have no access to electronic devices. And now if you want to get a test, according to that press conference, you have to make an application
Online.
online.
Yep.
Well, if you don't have electronic devices, how are you going to make the application online?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have electronic devices, how are you going to keep up with the school? I mean, there's a lot of things out here, but most importantly, from what you're saying about one set of remedies versus another set, we just, the profit motive gets in the way, in
Yep.
my opinion. It gets in the way all too often.
Very true.
Exactly. And we can just even look at what is really proving to be a complete failure of this medical system and supposedly the strongest country in the world, certainly the richest country in the world in terms of stealing people's money and hoarding all the profits that they make from exploiting people. I'm hearing things that even I find incredible to believe. Like there are not enough kits to test people,
Mm-hmm.
and the mayor of Newark had a press conference this morning. At least I think it was this morning. This is when I was watching it, and you had people on, from the health field, and they're saying that they don't really have enough test kits. And so what they suggested that people do is that instead of, if you suspect that you have this virus, instead of going to the emergency room, that's how a lot of people tend to take care of their medical issues through the emergency room, in poor communities. They said instead of doing that, try to go to your healthcare provider. A lot of people do not have a personal healthcare
Right.
provider because they don't have insurance,
Mm-hmm.
or that
That's
becomes an
correct. Yeah.
issue.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, there are people who live on the street, and then we also have people who are incarcerated,
Mm-hmm.
and yet we do not have enough enough kids to be able to test them. And then they talked about the concerns with overburdening the hospitals. And what has been going
Thank you.
on in this country? The closing of hospitals. I know
Yeah.
in the Newark area alone, at least, oh my gosh, there may have been about 3 or 4 hospitals that I know that were closed within
Yeah.
Essex County, because Newark is in Essex County.
Mm-hmm.
Orange Memorial, St. Michael's, so many hospitals closed. And
Yeah.
now they're afraid. They're going to want to be tested, and they're not going to be able to get tested, or that there's that kind of a block, there's that kind of an impediment to being tested. South Korea, from what I understand,
Mm-hmm.
they
Yeah.
just,
Yes.
when they heard about this, they said, everybody, free test
Hmm.
and free care. You will be taken care of.
There you
And then
go.
we also, exactly, we have people who are undocumented. And in this
Yes.
in this environment, the fear that this must bring to them,
Mm.
because if they don't have certain papers, they're going to be afraid to go. I can imagine the fear they will feel to go to a
That's
hospital
right.
because they could be possibly apprehended by ICE. This is
Yep.
outrageous.
Yeah, and
Outrageous.
even in places like Newark that are supposedly sanctuary cities, they're under attack by the militarized ICE people from recent edicts coming down from our president. So yeah, I mean, it was bad enough a year ago. It's even worse today. That
Exactly.
fear that you're describing, but no one should. No one should have that fear. I
Mm-hmm.
remember years ago when I lived in Newark. This is talking about 1983, 84, where the fear, not the fear, but the problem was, and still is, people trying to make a decision between putting food on their table and going to the doctor. Now
Exactly.
it's that same decision plus fear of being caught, fear of being deported, fear of being, taken in by whatever authority. So it's been amplified, and this, yeah, I don't know, this country, whatever the ideals of it may or may not have been, it's certainly not living up. It never has, but it's certainly not living up to those ideals now. And I don't know if a crisis like this can't be the catalyst to get us to do some of these things. I don't know what will be. This is yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of all
Exactly.
coming to a head right here.
Yes.
All these things that we've always talked
Indeed.
about, that like how
Yeah.
war and imperialism is the umbrella issue on top of so many other smaller issues that people throughout the United States care about, because primarily the all of the money goes towards war and imperialism,
There
and
you
is
go.
not put towards these other social services and health and education and whatever it might be. And right now we're seeing that like every single one of these systems has the potential of falling apart and not being able to help
Yes.
people. But meanwhile, we're bombing people right now still. Like even in the midst of dealing with this, when we can't provide for our own citizens, we're still like, hey, let's authorize a new bombing campaign and affect these countries that are also dealing with the same pandemic that we're dealing with. Like, I can't wrap my mind around people deciding that that's okay, and how that is communicated to Americans who are like, what the hell? Everybody's stunned right now. Why isn't the government doing better at providing testing, at providing everything that we need right now to beat this? Every other country that's experiencing it is telling us that we're far behind the curve, that it's going to hit us here harder than it hit them. And then to see
Oh,
on the TV at the same time that we're bombing Iraq, like what kind of message does that send?
well, here's one message because remember they coughed up immediately $1.50 trillion,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
billion,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
trillion. I don't even know. I
Trillion.
don't even know how to write that. I don't even know how to write that. I wouldn't know what that looked like in writing, let alone
Mm.
trying to imagine what it actually is. But one
Mm-hmm.
and a half trillion dollars for its corporate citizens, corporate America. I don't
That's
even
right.
know exactly what that means in terms of who actually gets that money, because that's going into some people's pockets, not ours.
Mm-hmm.
And yet people are living on the streets. People are literally selling their blood plasma to make ends meet in this country. Yes, selling blood and plasma has become a multi-billion-dollar industry that the U.S. is capitalizing off of and exploiting, because who's going to be the ones to really be selling their plasma? People who are poor, people who
That's
are
right.
destitute, you know. And I just want to just talk just real briefly about maybe some things that we can do, because we want people to understand there are things we can do, even if there might be small things, but there really are no such thing as something small, because we have to be there for each other. We have to make each other feel somewhat, or not feel so isolated. And so you
Yeah.
mentioned a lot about they're talking about social distancing. Oh, I can imagine what they're going to turn that into. But we can
Mhm.
do things, I think, such as making sure that people who live by themselves, whether they are
That's
young
right.
or older, that they have
That's
somebody
right.
they can in their neighborhood. We can start texting people. I know in the Newark area, I should say, we're calling for a meeting next Saturday. I don't know if we're going to be able to meet in person, probably not. But we plan to, if we can't meet in person, to try to have some kind of webinar or whatever, but for people to talk about the skills that they have, that they live close enough to each other so that if
Mm.
somebody needs something, they don't have to
Mm.
feel so isolated. I've started a group on a little Facebook group. I just started it today, but this is something for people to think about. If they could start maybe groups, social media groups within their community,
Mm-hmm.
like this one I did for Essex County, so people don't necessarily have to feel so alone, and it begins to filter out
Mm-hmm.
information. So much is we're getting so much information, but you need to know what's going on locally in your area. What are the services that are being offered? And if for some reason you are not able to take advantage of those services, or you are being giving any kind of difficulty, a lot of red tape, you need to know that there are people that you can reach out to and say, hey, look, I'm having a difficulty with this. And maybe we can start to organize in some kind of way with phone calls or whatever. And in terms of if we had to protest because it's outrageous that they are doing the things that they're doing. They're talking about with social distancing being about 2 or 3 feet away from each other. So maybe we could have a protest that would make us look
Yeah,
much than we might be, but standing 2 to 3 feet away from each other and letting
yeah,
them know you are not going to do this. I don't care what it takes. We can no longer sit by and watch this earth be literally destroyed because of policies. We can have another show about that at some point, but the agricultural policies and what
oh
happened with
gosh, yeah,
fire and the destruction in Australia. We can literally talk about the ways in which colonialism and imperialism is truly destroying the earth, and in the way that it's destroying the life on earth. We cannot continue to have a system that is built on murder and dropping bombs and war
that's
and
right.
exploiting the planet. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we just can't do that.
Yeah, and I'm with you 3,000%, Lisa. And just add that I know there's a similar group, the Greens, some Morris County Greens have set up uh, something, I think they call it a mutual aid society. And one of our members is going out, she's putting up posters and such throughout a particular part of Morris County so that. People who are shut-ins, people who can't get out for whatever reason, people who don't have money, people who are losing money because they
Mm-hmm.
can't go to work, um, anything along those lines. You're so right to look in. I mean, we've done this before, like after in a power blackout after Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, for 10, 12, 14 days, people were looking in on each other. We really still need to do that in as safe a way as possible, of course. But I think there are ways. There are ways to pick up food for people and bring it to their doorstep. But I think, yeah, your social media, all that social media networking that you've talked about, as well as if you're brave enough to go out, and hang up signs to let people know that this service exists. These are things we need to do. Yeah. We have to resist
Mm-hmm.
the whole idea of social distancing.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea of like Broad and Market Street in Newark or something, or just going up Market Street every 4 or 5 feet, have somebody else standing up there with a sign, and then you go up a little further with a sign, and all the way up to the courthouse. It would be quite impressive,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because we can't. I mean, I know in Palestine, I thought about this and wrote about it the other day. I have a friend who lives on the West Bank, and when I first met this person, he said we don't have a centimeters worth of distance or room to breathe,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really understand what he meant until I was there on the West Bank for a few days, and I saw how the occupation was squeezing and smothering the people who were living there. And at first I think that's what we felt. I know that's what I felt, like smothered, and there's no place to go and nothing, and this is only going to get worse. And then slowly, some of these ideas are surfacing, and some much more creative ways of reaching out. And this is where our strength lies, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
our creativity on this, to combat what we know is wrong and we've been fighting against for years. Now we have to fight against it with everything we have, and not just politically. And community building is a fight against this. Just rebuilding our
Mm-hmm.
communities to stand together and fight back.
Yes, I think there's a reason that community has been so lost in this country, because community is so powerful, and it's just the sense of community and the ability of people to connect in that way has really, really been damaged. And one thing that I keep thinking about, and I'm so glad to hear that it's existing in places that I'm finding online, and that the stories that you both just told from some experience that I have with disaster relief, is that, like, that's what this needs to start looking like. You were concerned, you were a little bit concerned, Madeline, about how we're being told to social distance, and we are being separated from each other and isolated, and how that could be bad because that's the wrong direction to go in. But I think this is also a huge opportunity to realize how much we need each other, because just like after a natural disaster happens, anyone who's lived through one never ever has a positive thing to say about FEMA or the Red Cross or those systems that are set up to help. Just exploit the situations, and they profit off of it. They don't help like they say they are. They give misinformation. They make people run and jump through hoops to get help. And that's what we're seeing with this on a national scale. And that's what we're going to continue to see as things get worse. So it's a really good opportunity for us to build those networks, whether it's on Facebook or using the Nextdoor community app or any other platforms that already exist in your neighborhoods. Build those now.
There's a Nextdoor community app?
Nextdoor, like your next door neighbor. It's Nextdoor. A lot of neighborhoods have begun using that in the last maybe 10 years or so, and it you can check your neighborhood. I think you can put in your address or something to see if you're on there, and only people that live in the area are allowed. Like, they send you a postcard to your address to verify that you're part of this neighborhood. And it's a place where there's there can be listings for you're selling things or free things or just message boards. It can end up being a place where people complain, like, nobody's picking up the dog poop, nobody's shoveling or whatever. But at a time like this, because there's already been those connections made and neighbors are already signed up for this thing, it's a really, really good way to continue to connect with your neighbors. So I've seen on our local Nextdoor community here that people are thinking about that. They've created a separate group. We need to start making sure that we're checking in on the elderly, on single parents, on immunocompromised people. We need to do food drops for these people. Like, we need to think about these things now, and to get some of those things in play now before we're in the middle of a panic, because it's so much harder. and we can't wait for our national, state, local governments to do these things for us, because they never do it as well as we need. They just don't. You just have to kind of toss that idea out the window. We need to rely on each other. So maybe we can learn from this. Maybe this will be finally the thing that reminds us that, oh, hi neighbor, I need to know your name. We need to rely on each other.
Oh, definitely. And I was just going to say, maybe also just another thing that we can do is maybe people who, there's probably a lot of apps, and you also have to remember a lot of people are not necessarily connected to social media, but for those who are, there might be a lot of other different apps that are great that I don't even know about. So maybe we could begin to also start making a list of various kind of apps, because I had never heard. I'm just learning about Slack. I'm just now learning about Slack. I'm like, what? I'm good that I'm on Instagram right now, but these are things that we can do. We have to focus on what we can do, and definitely build up your immune system. It is time that we eat like our lives depend on it, which they do. And eating is only about one thing. There's only one purpose that eating has, and that is to provide us with sustenance so that we can thrive, so that we can live on this earth. We are earthlings, which means that our bodies perfectly adapted to this climate so that we could live on it and reproduce. If our bodies weren't adapted to this climate, we wouldn't be here. We have to build up our immune system. The first life forms on this planet, I can assure you, were not doctors. And we can ask our one question: which came first, the earth or the pharmaceutical industry? I think it was the earth. And somehow life appeared on this planet. Humans were not the first life forms. There were other life forms before humans, and the first humans were not doctors. And guess what happened? This earth sustained life. It sustained it. And we should go back to understanding that relationship and appreciating it. And if anything, we should be trying to work synergistically with the earth so that we can understand it more. Like when people created vitamins and things of that nature. That was a good thing because it gave people who might not be around all these natural plants stuff, it gave them the ability to say, okay, you know what, you can still have some benefit from that plant or that fruit. And this is the way that society should be working instead of trying to destroy life. And they're doing a damn good job at it. You know, uh, colonialism and racism and Eurocentrism, that's what it was based on. It's just the truth. They've done a very good job at it, and we need a better way and another way. This is killing us.
Yeah, no,
Definitely.
it's very true. And if I can be so crass, I don't know if the analogy really fits, but in a way, diplomacy is strengthening one's immune system in the sense that if we can learn to live with one another, respect one another, and the killer sanctions and the wars, and find ways to talk to one another in order to work out the problems we've got, to respect one another, not to exploit, not to go into to steal resources and such, but to say, look, can we help each other here? It's like, people say, even in my classes, sometimes I say, well, why don't we use diplomacy instead of war? And someone will say, well, you can't talk to, quote unquote, those people, they don't listen. And I say, well, really, where do you use diplomacy? Do you need it with your friends? Not really. I mean, you could talk about things and figure it out. We need diplomacy with people who we don't understand. And we don't understand doesn't make us better, and that it just means we don't understand. And that's a muscle to use, to listen, to hear, to synthesize the information, to understand what people are going through. And so, like the immune system to our bodies, we got to work on the muscles of diplomacy and listening and understanding. And we never will do that as long as we keep on relying on weapons of war, whatever those weapons are, to divide our countries apart, to divide not our countries, divide the people. Really, the more that I've had a chance to travel, the more it's clear people are not divided from the people. It's governments that divide us. So people, they may not like the U.S. government, but they like the people, and it's the same all over the world. We need to remember that and work on that, develop those muscles to make a healthier world, because otherwise, I mean, the military is also the world's largest polluter, and we want to end climate change. We want to end climate change. We want to, as you said, Lisa, to sustain ourselves. Well, we got to stop the wars and stop creating so much pollution, and we can't stop the wars unless we listen to one. I mean, you and I, all of us, we are listening, but unless our governments change their attitudes toward other people around the planet, where it feels good to say that. But I don't know if you see that as similar to developing the immune and creating a healthy immune system. But
well, I surely think that we have to have all kinds of ways to process it, to process these things and to break them down. And, that was, I don't have any problem with that analogy, because there's going to be, we have to present things in ways that people can hear and can understand them. And, but, I don't even like to say I'm surprised any longer, because if I say that, I know there's going to be something else that's going to come along that's going to shock me even more, because, we're speechless, right? It's just the depravity and the depth of the things that this country is capable of doing. It's that they would. Well, but this presents the opportune time for them to bomb and to do more military maneuvers. It really does. And then I heard that they talk about the supply chain being possibly disrupted, so they're bringing in the military to try to stop that. they talked about, I heard, I didn't get a chance to verify this, but I heard that in California, they can now commandeer private property if they have to for this pandemic. Again, that's what I heard. I can't verify it. Or I haven't had the chance to verify it yet, but it's just, but surely we can see that that's a possibility. That's not something that sounds unbelievable. That's a possibility. We can see that it could head in that direction, and even more so, even if there is some reason or some necessity to do certain of the things that they're doing now, does not mean that we should not just lay back. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be questioning because we must, and we surely must be able to say, we don't want this aspect of it to happen again, or well, first of all, we don't want this happening again, period, because it doesn't really need to. And if the United States would stop doing all these horrible experiments, and I just want to tell you about one thing that did happen for sure, and this was in Newark, New Jersey, in 2009, when 3 mice with the bubonic plague escaped from 3 separate cages from the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, which is now, I think, Rutgers Hospital. But this was in 2009. 3 mice with the bubonic plague escaped from 3 separate cages. Now, you might ask, why did they infest mice with the bubonic plague? I thought that was supposed to be gone. I thought that was a thing of the past, but it's not, because they were experimenting. And then how did they escape from separate cages? And then it's bad enough if living mice escape, but then we had dead mice about 3 or 4 years later that also somehow managed to escape into the city of Newark. And the way that people got the bubonic plague was that fleas bit mice, and then they bit humans, and that's how it got transmitted to humans. And this is the kind of experimentation that this country is working on. This is the kind of stuff that it is engaged in.
And
they also want to make the Ebola virus airborne.
And all of those things, again, come right back to the fact that our country is what it's built on, what is like running through its veins. Just the fact that we are a warmongering country that pushes death and destruction and imperialism. We're not working on positive things here. That doesn't mean there's not good people here. That doesn't mean there's not good people in the government and in some of these systems, but it's just overall, it's all so negative. It's all, they're working on these scary things that I wish they weren't. And going back to how, because that's who we are, the way that we're harming other countries in the midst of this is just, it's just sickening. And to think about people that are stuck in Gaza, people in Yemen, the people in Iran right now. We're talking about how we can help ourselves, how we can have better nutrition, which is important for us here, and how we can have our support systems and our neighborhoods set up, how we can access each other on the internet, and all of those things. There are some people in our country who, for these same reasons, can't access those things. But there's so many more people in these other countries that we are constantly hurting, that just have no even little bit of an opportunity to boost their immune systems right now. And it's just so mind-boggling to think about what could happen in some of these countries if we don't step back. And I don't see any indication that we will if we just authorized more strikes on Thursday. It's, anytime that you see an elected official even hint at paying attention to how sanctions and bombing and whatever that we do is hurting other people, we need to boost those messages big time and get that idea out in front of more people right now. Because if it's going to come back to bite us too. We need to stop the spread of something like this around the world. Maybe we'll stop it here eventually, but if it's still spreading in other places because we've directly damaged their ability to stop us, it's gonna come back. How are we, we all need to be working on this together. And it seems like other countries are trying to work on this together more. Like, just a few days ago, I saw a tweet that China is ready to help Italy. They're sending them 1,000 lung ventilators, which all countries are short on things like ventilators, 2 million face masks, 20,000 protective suits, and 50,000 test kits. You know, China could hold on to those things. It could try to sell them. It could, you know, but they're like, here, Italy, you need help. We are, as a global population of humanity, because we are all humans, we need to help each other. We need to not hurt each other right now. And I just, it's so sad that our focus right now continues to be hurting other people.
Right. And let me just throw out this thing real quickly that I learned about yesterday. And I have to apologize because I don't remember the name of the source, but somebody had done a very excellent video. And I always like to give credit to sources whenever I can. So I apologize about that. But Italy is another one of the countries, at least in Europe, that's really being decimated by this virus.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, other countries in that area have smaller, I forget the numbers that Italy has, but we're hearing about Italy being decimated. And Italy,
shut down completely.
yep, Italy is one of the countries, and I just learned about this, that had entered into the new China Silk Road agreement or something. They did it. The EU, the European Union, didn't know they were doing this, and neither did the United States. And from what I understand, the United States was very, very upset that Italy would do this, and the EU didn't like it either. And we surely need to look more into, at least I know I do, in terms of what this new China Silk Road agreement or whatever meant, because it had something to do with, of course, economics and the Chinese, you know, their currency and all of that kind of stuff, and how that was going to affect the EU and the US dollar and domination. But Italy did that. And from what I understand, that was considered a big no-no by the US and the EU. And I'm just saying, Italy is the country in that area that is really being, basically decimated. But their numbers are just astronomical when you look at the numbers of some of the countries surrounding that. Now, we all know that this virus, this pandemic is really starting to affect other countries as well. And that's one of the things when you engage in biological warfare, that those diseases and those germs and those viruses that you let into the universe, they don't just stay in one area. You know, they will start to spread out. And, you know, well, we all know the U.S. talks about collateral damage anyway. They say that all the time. That's not my term. That's their term. They say, well, you know, hey, some people are going to have to die, but what we do, hey, so what? So, you know, but we should.
Right. Remember those 500,000, bringing back to sanctions, the 500,000 Iraqi children who were killed because of U.S. sanctions, and Madeleine Albright, our wonderful leader there, saying that, oh, if that allowed us to topple Saddam Hussein, well, the loss of those 500,000 children's lives was a price worth paying. I mean, this is. I mean, she's still is looked to for information about how to conduct foreign affairs, how that can be still lionized, you know, after saying something like that, or Hillary Clinton, laughing basically at the U.S. assassination of Gaddafi, and now there's, slave trade is back in Libya and continues. The United States never takes a long, hard look at itself and the impact of its policies and its priorities. And you just reminded me of those two situations, Lisa, the one, especially the 500,000 children who died from sanctions. U.S. imposed sanctions, and we just, Madeleine Albright shrugs her shoulders. Yeah, it's a price worth paying. No, it's not. No, it's not.
It's like the mentality, well, we had to destroy the village in order to save the village.
There we go. There we go.
We have to bomb human rights into people or whatever, like humanitarian bombing.
and even in medicine, there's something called the double effect, where it's like, oh well, yeah, well, we know these medications, yeah, they might kill you. We know, yeah, 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 or they might, but there's some good. We were also trying to do some good. At least they brought down your blood pressure. I'm like, yeah, but they killed you. You had
Yeah,
to
yeah,
kill them
yeah.
to do it. But yeah, but your blood pressure has been brought down.
Yeah, basically.
I'm being a little facetious,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah,
at
well,
that extreme. But really, in a way, it is kind of that extreme because I've literally seen some of these medications. I mean, I was listening, one time just, nonchalantly listening to whatever I was listening to, and I heard some medication come on television and they're talking about, oh, if you have sinuses or allergies or whatever like that, take this. And the list of the side effects are much
yes,
longer than any benefit.
yes,
But one of the side effects was that it could cause cancer. Literally,
Mm-hmm.
there are medications now that they have where the side effects could be that it could cause cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I were exaggerating, but I'm not.
Yep. We have a commenter on YouTube who's been saying a lot that I just wanted to mention quickly. De El Sendero has said a lot of good stuff, including the fact that Jack Ma, a Chinese billionaire, he was ready to donate 500,000 test kits to the U.S. I know that there have been some offers from people in China to contribute in that way, and because the United States doesn't just think about the benefit to its people or any other people in a choice that it makes, unfortunately, it very well may turn down offers like that just because it doesn't want to accept help from a Chinese billionaire or the Chinese government or whatever. And the same person also brought up the collateral damage that happens here in our country, including cancer clusters because of poisoned water, Superfund sites all over the world, but that's coming out water quality even more and more here, and that the way that connects to this story too, that so many of our bodies are already, instead of like being ready and full to tackle something, they're already down here, not only because of nutrition, but because there's PFAS in our water. Our waters are poisoned by forever chemicals, a lot of times because of military Superfund sites and stuff that this has bled into every single aspect of our lives and other people around the world. And people need to realize how much more we have in common with, that we're in a way under sanctions from our own government too, in the way that they've harmed our food and our water, and we don't have access to health care and all of these things, that we have so much more in common with these people overseas than our government that's trying to tell us what to do right now. We need to really just strip it down and look at things on a level of humanity, how we are all connected by the fact that we're human and we're experiencing similar things to other people, and it couldn't be more obvious than it is right now. I really hope more people just kind of wake up to the reality of how we've been set up to not be able to deal with something like this. It's scary, and I hope that people prepare themselves in the best way that they can, and those that can't prepare, find people that are able to help them and educate them on the reality of what's going on right now.
Oh, definitely.
With you 1,000%, or 3,000, or whatever it is, the top of the line.
Oh. Yes. Yeah. I've mentioned it a few times. I'm just really happy to see that there are a lot of people drawing attention to the fact that sanctions, especially on Iran specifically, but that
Venezuela too.
That Venezuela is, they've had their first case there in Venezuela. It's going to be everywhere.
In Venezuela too.
Yes. And there's an article that I was looking at in Venezuela Analysis. The title is "Venezuela Confirms Coronavirus Cases as U.S. Slaps New Sanctions." So,
there it is.
We don't,
there it is.
Even people like us who like to keep up with these things, I don't even know the current status of what the most recent information is about sanctions that we've been putting on Venezuela. But they've declared a state of emergency, and apparently we're ramping up sanctions right now. It's really disturbing.
Sanctions are about economic terrorism, economic warfare, and it's about also trying to completely destabilize a country and to turn, and for the citizens of that country to turn against the people who are, currently in power or the system of government that they have. And that's exactly what it is designed to do. And it is utterly demoralizing. And this country just continues to find ways to terrorize the world. And I'm going to tell you this right now. Well, the pool of candidates have dwindled down to the most nightmarish scenario that you could possibly think of, especially if the Democrats make Biden their choice. And I have a lot of issues with the Democrats and Bernie Sanders, although I'm supporting somebody. Lawrence Taylor is running for U.S. Senate, and I'm definitely behind Lawrence. I mean, I love Madeline too. The first time ever where two people whom I actually think would be great are running. That is so usually never the case. But anyway, but Sanders needs to stand up much more strongly about this war if he really wants to get my vote. But we should have much better choices for president. I mean, Biden is like the most nightmarish scenario that you could possibly imagine for various reasons, not just because of his politics, but we know that physically he's just not capable of doing that. And I think that the Democratic Party is really making mockery of very serious issues of when people begin to show mental health issues, whether it's people are suffering from dementia or whatever. And these are very serious issues that they're politicizing and making a mockery of, because there's no way when you look at Biden that you can't talk about that. There's no way that you can't. And people should. They should talk about the fact that he is not mentally astute enough, mentally able to hold any kind of office. He just is not. And it's just so demoralizing that the Democratic Party, they're going to do that because really it is about being against the people. It is not even so much about what Bernie Sanders actually says as much as it is about what people see, the potential that people see. It is really about what people are looking for, who want a change. And the Democratic Party doesn't want anything like that. They are so much more aligned with the Republican Party that they would really prefer a Trump than a Bernie Sanders. But I will say this much, any president, anybody running for any office, I don't care if you're running for dog catcher, where do you stand on issues of war? And also as a person, in the African liberation struggle, where do you also stand on reparations? Because the issues of reparations also is very much tied to colonialization, war, the war you've implemented against African people from day number one, and how you are using those same policies, that same mentality that allowed you to come in, that allowed the settlers to invade this country, to practice, to engage in genocide on the indigenous people, and then to enslave African people, and to demoralize and practice terror on us, and to now take that policy internationally. No, it's got to stop. And people today got to realize, hey, you know what? I am responsible for what my ancestors did, because it leads to these conditions. They have to change. And in terms of what Europe did, in terms of the devastating, the brutal mentality that Europeans engaged in to justify this, which was, I don't like to use the word white supremacy, but white racism, and that is what they engaged in. The world is not going to tolerate it. As an African person, I can't tell another group of people what they should or should not do or whatever, but I would, if I were not African, I would hope that I would still have the same policy I do, because I would be looking at myself and saying, I don't want any part of this system and this mindset and this mentality that is just so disrespectful and so harmful. We have to objectively look at these things and be willing to say no more. And that is one of the things that looking at reparations and acknowledging reparations and paying reparations, which is really getting off kind of easy, because if I had my way, they'd be paying with more than reparations for it. I'd go dig up every one of them who engaged in this and be like, no, you don't get off this easily. with what you're doing. And certainly we see the continuation of that today with how people just do certain kind of policies and they are not even forced to pay for it then. So it's important. It is a must. And I'm looking at like, well, you just coughed up $1.5 trillion out of nowhere. Literally, they pulled it out of thin air. And while I'm like, you can do the same with the reparations. You can do it. It basically just shows they can do whatever they want to do when they want to do it. And it's the things they don't want to do that they're gonna haggle over and talk about. Oh my gosh, we can't pay for health care. We just can't do that. No way, no way. So anyway.
Yeah, we're actually seeing that a lot right now with not just the government, but companies. Like the internet won't be cut off for people who can't pay their bills over the next month or two. Water won't be cut out. We won't be doing evictions. All these things that you made us think that it wasn't possible for these things to happen, but all of a sudden it's possible for you to put off bill payment, to not shut stuff down, to even there's police forces that are saying we're not going out for small calls anymore. You guys are on your own because they don't want to risk their officers catching coronavirus. And so these things that so many people have been complaining about for so long that you've been saying are not possible actually are when it comes down to it. And to think that for things like reparations, for things like ending sanctions, for stopping war, you act like these things aren't possible, but when it comes down to it, if they had to happen, they could. So we need, for all of these things, but especially the things that are in front of us right now with this virus and the way that Iran is suffering and the way that Venezuela might now, we need to demand that they stop this.
And we need to look closely at Colombia too, and all of Latin America. I mean, I've been guilty of this for much of my adult activist life, of looking at Middle East and Asia and outside of our hemisphere, but right here in our own hemisphere, we are all America. I traveled to Colombia for the first time in my life this last year, just about a year ago, as a matter of fact. And I came back and I noticed how many times that we in our discussions of things we say America, referring only to the United States. And the United States is not all of America, and Colombia and the United States are engaged in just discussions and military exercises so that they together can intervene in Venezuela. And the people of Colombia are suffering. People of Colombia, the economy is in shambles. The indigenous in Colombia, I saw something a few days ago, after a certain number, there was one social leader or indigenous leader per day. I think 54 out of the first 40 days of the year, 54 social leaders were killed in Colombia because people are trying to protest against major hydroelectric plants or major agribusiness, going back to what Lisa's been talking about with, agribusiness and how that's killing us. They're trying to convert a whole way of life in Colombia to another one, with destroying land, water, soil, way of life. It's just, we, as you said to Emma, our attention is focused on this. Our attention is focused on how interconnected we are. I'm just putting in a couple of words to not disconnect ourselves from our brothers and sisters and friends in Central and South America, because we can do better. And we have to stop what's going on in Venezuela, the sanctioning of Venezuela, that is. And we have to stop this partisanship, this partisan divide or ideological divide. Oh, they live in a socialist country, so we don't have to care about them. Those folks, there's a couple of wars going on, that partisan divides, I should say, that we just have to put aside. And I think all of us do. I think the people do, but the governments don't, and we have to counter that.
Definitely. And also, like, sanctions are like the sanctions in Zimbabwe and sanctions in so many other countries. They have to stop. They must end now. It is economic terrorism, and
Sure.
it has to stop. The United States can't say America's got to get this straight. Americans, all you citizens here, all you everyday people, you can point fingers at no one. You can point fingers at no other country about anything. You've got to clean up your own. You are in no position to do that. And you have
That's
to
right.
understand that.
Mm-hmm. I want to make sure we draw some attention just to the fact that this weekend, and things have changed because of what we're dealing with, but this weekend was supposed to be a time to draw attention to the fact that sanctions kill, that sanctions are an act of war. March 13th through 15th are the International Days of Action Against Sanctions and Economic War. There were a lot of events planned for this in various places. Some of those things have moved online because of people can't gather, because people want to keep themselves safe. I haven't been following each of these things, but just be on the lookout for those things over the next couple of days. Some of them might even have been rescheduled for during the week or next weekend. I'm not sure. But if you go to sanctionskill.org, there's a lot of resources there where you can learn more about just sanctions in general and how they are harming countries and what we're doing to these various countries. And then on your own, you can think about how all of that stuff is just completely exasperated when we're dealing with a global health crisis like the coronavirus right now. It's just kind of the perfect storm for those of us who've paid attention to sanctions and know how much it harms places. Knowing that something like this is possible, it's exactly everybody's sort of worst nightmare. So now is the time to kind of keep pushing this, like we were going to anyways, because that's what these days were scheduled for. But it's a perfect time to highlight the fact that we are directly harming the ability of multiple countries to deal with this pandemic right now, while we harm our own country's ability to deal with it also. We are like the worst piece of the puzzle for dealing with the coronavirus right now. I don't know if anybody's doing quite as bad of a job as the United States, unfortunately. We've been live for about an hour and a half now, so it's probably a good time to tie things up. I don't know if either of you have anything else that you want to say, that you want to make sure people know, or go to find you somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say two words. I'm a Green. I'm running as a Green. I work with the Green Party in New Jersey. I'm a candidate with the New Jersey Green Party for U.S. Senate against a senator who is who is awful on the issue of Palestine, Senator Cory Booker. Also not very good on the issue of South America, Central America. It's going to be an interesting time in terms of still gathering signatures on petitions and getting on the ballot for June. I know Lisa mentioned Larry Ham. He's got less time than I do to get signatures because he's running in the Democratic Party primary, and I'm going to be in the general election regardless. But these times are just very challenging to do our work. We could use volunteers. We're going to be doing regular video broadcasts and so on. So you can find me either on my website, hoffmanforsenate.com, or Hoffman for Senate 2020 on Facebook. Or check out the Green Party of New Jersey, either their website or Facebook pages. The interesting thing is, as you said, Emma, we've been working on these issues for a very long time, and we're not going to stop, and we will continue no matter where things go in the next couple of months or couple of years. And the Green Party is an anti-war party, an anti-imperialist party, a pro-reparations party. We're just so glad to be a part of this effort and any other efforts put together, organized by March on the Pentagon. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline.
And I am Lisa Davis. I am with the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. I love saying that name because I think it says it all. And I happen to be with its healthcare working group. And again, that healthcare working group is dedicated to, well, definitely in terms of helping to educate and support the African American or the African community with the realization that the medical science and how it's been colonized and weaponized against our people. So we definitely have to have a strong voice on the front lines of that. But even with that, there's so much information that we learn about, that we study, that we work with, and that we try to get out to the people, because we really do need to understand these so-called systems, and what they call medicine is based on Eurocentric colonialism, and that has devastating effect. It really impacts everybody. It really does. But as African people, we need to understand that. We need to understand that health is political. And I'm also a member of the People's Organization for Progress, which is a New Jersey-based organization dedicated to social justice, peace, and reparations as well. They truly are. And they have been on the front line of so many issues in this country, revolutionary, progressive, necessary issues. And Lawrence Ham is running for U.S. Senator for the state of New Jersey. And I'm just so proud to say the things that he talks about. Let me just see if I can put this up, since I don't have one of his buttons in front of me. But the things that he talks about, I can't see my video any longer, but the things he talks about, he's been fighting for his whole life. And he's running for a U.S. Senator. And I know Madeline as well. And like I said, it's just an unusual position to be in when you know of two people who you think are good to be running for the Senate. That is usually not the way it happens. Usually I don't know of anybody that I think is very good to be running for office. And usually it's like one person is so horrible and the other person isn't as horrible. So that's kind of a unique position to be in. But I'm like, that feels much better than being in a position where where we have been getting what we have been getting, where the whole system has been so thoroughly horrible. Or, so this is a much better position to be in. And I hope I'm in this position every election. I hope that there's a whole field of candidates that I think are so good. And I'm like, oh, well, hey, I'll take this one or that one. It's good to have the choice to, instead of choosing the lesser of two evils, to literally choose between two candidates who you have respect for. That's a better position to be in. Those are better choices than choosing between the lesser of two evils. I would rather choose between, which candidate has been working their life? Which one has been committed to this issue? Which one has been committed to that issue? Which one has been doing that? It's a much better choice, much better field to choose from. So unusual, but I'm going to take advantage of it while I can.
Maybe on the other side of this, we'll have more opportunity for that, because it's becoming quite clear which elected officials and which candidates for various offices right now are actually helpful when we're dealing with what we're dealing with right now. It's shining a light on a lot of problems, and so maybe after this is over, a lot of people will begin to realize the kinds of people that we need to put in office, and maybe we'll see what you're dealing with right now, Lisa, that we'll have a lot of good choices.
Exactly. Let me just also say, you will also find Larry Ham and Madeline Hoffman working together on a lot of things, and they will probably still work together. You will find that.
We'll still be out there,
Yep.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things that needs to happen is, and Larry and I right now are running parallel. He's running in the primary and I'm not, and then I'm running in the general. Should he win the primary, then both candidates will be on the ballot in November. But what we really need to do, we need to change You know, I remember 20 years ago listening to Ralph Nader and others talk about if you keep on voting for the lesser of two evils, you still get evil and they become lesser and lesser. And if you take 1996, when Nader first ran, and compare it to 2016 when Trump won, you know, we have living proof that voting for the lesser of two evils continues to get us evil.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to change the way we conduct our voting. We need ranked choice voting. We need to be able to vote for our first two choices so that, you know, when there are good candidates, or you don't have to choose between them both, or if you don't have to just vote strategically, I'm voting for this one because I got to get rid of that one. You have the ability to vote for the person you really want, and hopefully we'll be able to implement that soon as well.
Right.
Yep.
And you can vote for the one that you think should be in, but you don't have to feel like the whole world is just going to end because if the one you want to get in isn't going to get in. You don't have to feel like, oh my gosh, it's doomed now. But that's the way it is right now.
It's always the most important election of our lives. Every time at this point.
This is true.
Yeah, we got to get over that hump and get back to. Yeah, you're right, and it's always between the lesser of two evils, but then you're diluting it every time, and it's less that it's all evil in the end, unfortunately, and people really need to realize that. You can say maybe once the lesser of two evils, but the time, if that continues to compound, there's a tiny, tiny fraction of that is good, and then you're left with this much evil versus this much evil, and there's.
And even if you have elections where you have candidates, and Lawrence Ham he has good name recognition, I would say, in New Jersey, because he's been working so hard. And I think he's the one candidate that Booker feels can give him a bit of a fight, and not saying anything disrespectful toward you, Madeline, at all. But I remembered when Lawrence Ham announced his candidacy, it was not too long after that that Booker, who was running for the presidency, decided, I'm just going to focus on the Senate. But when you have candidates, or when you have people also capable of running in an election, when they are putting forth issues that are so necessary, Larry Ham is definitely anti-war, definitely, and strongly pro-reparations, anti-police brutality. I mean, his whole campaign are these issues. And you heard Madeline also say that she is the same. That is so necessary, because that is going to change the level of conversation. That's going to have to elevate it even more, which we need. These are the issues we need to be talking about when we are talking about who we're going to vote for. We need to be talking about issues of war, ending these wars. Everybody needs to have a position on that. Reparations, you need to have a position on that. You need to have a position on what's going on with these horrible immigration issues, and the way that they're just treating people. You know, those issues need to be at the forefront. The issues need to be at the forefront of disarmament, even, you know. So these are the kind of things we want every politician to have a position on. And when you run extremely progressive politicians who are for the people, who have strong, meaningful platforms, that is important for elections, beyond whether or not they get into office. Although, of course, you want them to get into office, and I really do want, you know, I'm strongly think he should get in. But beyond whether or not one person gets in or not, the effect that it can have on the level of political thinking across the country is so important. And we need to do this.
Yes. Agree. Again, we're doing a good job of agreeing with each other.
Yeah.
That's great.
And we don't, in terms of elections, we also need to remember the healthcare system, the health insurance, the single payer, national health insurance program, which goes hand in hand with ending wars and getting that money, and tuition-free college, and things that the people of this country need. You know, and the more I'm with you again, that the more these issues are raised, the better it is, because we have a long way to go in pushing most Democrats and Republicans that point of view. We
Right.
really do.
Mm-hmm.
And that the true power really comes from the people, how we organize, how we stand up and fight back. And I do mean fight back. This can no longer go on.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, it cannot happen. We cannot leave the world the way it is for the generations, for our grandkids and our great grandkids. We cannot do that. We absolutely cannot. The younger generation has every right to be extremely upset with the older generation because of the condition that the world is in right now, which I don't think any other generation has ever had to face what the generation that is coming after mine. I don't think any other generation had to be faced with the potential of the environment of the earth being so destroyed that human beings can no longer inhabit it. I don't think any other generation has had to face that before. But this one coming up does, and our grandkids and our great grandkids,
Mm-hmm.
they might, we want them to be around so they don't have to think about those issues. But these are realities now.
And now, it's hard to find positives in what is happening in the world right now and what is on the verge of happening in our country right now with the coronavirus. But it very well may be making the perfect situation to have that major shift, because there is the potential for lots and lots of things to fall apart, for lots of people to realize, like we were saying, how elected officials right now are not prepared for this, and they don't have our best interests in mind. Money is being pumped into things that benefit businesses. So many things are just coming. They're having a light shined right on them right now, that hopefully, once we're through this, that encourages younger people and other people who are just done and frustrated. They get angry enough that they're going to rise up and change some of these systems. Hopefully, that might be a positive, something that we see good come out of this, and the potential to get enough light on the fact that sanctions are a horrible thing and are hurting countries right now way more than they have before. And if those could end, that power, showing how powerful we are, if we can rise up and get some of that stuff to change, we could see a huge shift in the future, and that would be amazing. Really,
that would be a great thing.
Yeah.
Well, we are almost at 2 hours. I know we could probably keep talking, but we should probably end this.
I think we.
Thank you.
Good time.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Very much.
Thank you so much. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you
Thank
for
you.
Diane for trying to join us earlier. I'm sorry that didn't work out for her, but
And power to the people.
Yes.
If I can still be seen, power to the people.
power to the people.
Out to the people.
For sure.
Okay.
All right. Goodbye, everybody, and
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
bye.
Thank you, March on the Pentagon, doing this work.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madeline, and thank you, Lisa, and thank you for everybody who watched. Have a good day, everybody.
Yep. Have a good one.